everyone. Welcome. My name is Stephanie Adams, and I will be the host for this TLC session. Thank you for joining us from Average to Academic, Supporting Developing Writers. Please welcome Jennifer Dunn and Louise Santani, Online Writing Consultants.
Hi, and welcome everyone. Today, Louie and I are going to talk about the significance of writing at the average or basic level and discuss why this matters. We're also going to discuss some strategies for supporting students who are still developing their writing skills at Ashford, including motivational strategies and how to use the resources currently available in the Writing Center to best support basic writers in academic courses and beyond as they apply those skills within their future career fields. So we're going to discuss how we can move students from being average writers to becoming academic writers. Now let's take a look at the demographics. Let's take a look at the student demographics to put this conversation into perspective, to get an idea of how many students are writing at an average level. Based on a recent general education written communication report, 31.9% of all Ashford students in gen ed courses demonstrated writing proficiency at a basic, below expectations, or non-performance level. Now, while this does not represent a majority of the students at Ashford, it does represent a significant portion of the students. It represents almost a third of all students at Ashford. And this area in gray here represents distinguished students that are writing at a distinguished or proficient level. But 1/3 is still a very significant portion of the population. Now, a breakdown of this, of the 31.9% is that 22.9% are writing at a basic level. 5.8% of all students are writing at a below expectations level, and 3.2% are writing or scored as non-performance. And I'm going to go over these different categories briefly. And as faculty, you're likely already familiar with these categories, but just so that we're all on the same page with what we mean by when we say basic or below expectations. Okay, so for basic students writing at the basic level, these students are receiving a passing grade. They're creating written work that has some structure, but is somewhat disorganized and may not achieve its intended purpose. They might be interpreting information adequately with some critical thinking and analysis, but the information lacks relevance or credibility. There may be inconsistencies in flow, or details may be missing. The writing generally contains some grammatical and clarity issues, but not enough to impact what the student is trying to convey. Most work is cited, but it might be cited incorrectly or not presented fairly. Students who are writing at the below expectations level, their written work is disorganized, unfocused, has major flaws in reasoning, and generally doesn't achieve its stated purpose. It demonstrates little evidence of critical thinking. There are inconsistencies in the flow, significant errors in the written work that affect the meaning and clarity of the work, and it may have an inappropriate style. The student attempts to integrate outside information, but not successfully, as most of the information lacks relevance or credibility. There are significant omissions or errors in citation style. The information is presented neither ethically nor fairly. And also for non-performance just means that the student did not turn in work or has turned in work that does not meet the basic requirements of the assignment. So let's talk about the significance of students writing at the basic level whose writing is not that bad. Why does that matter? Well, on an academic paper, we might say they're only making a few errors and the writing is not that bad. So it's possible. And that might be fine to receive a passing grade on an academic assignment, but in the workplace, this could have major consequences for students as they look for jobs. When a student is looking for a job outside of once they graduate, a recruiter won't say, oh, this candidate's writing isn't that bad. There are a few errors here and there, but it's passable, and want to hire that person over other candidates who might have, flawless resumes and cover letters. So students really need strong writing skills to be competitive in the employment marketplace. And we as educators have the opportunity to help bridge that gap for students. Employers have voiced concerns that poor email communication, the most common form of professional written communication, can affect client relations due to a lack of professionalism. Also, poor writing can skew the message and lead to clarity issues and misunderstandings in the workplace or with clients. So strong writing skills better prepare Ashford students for success beyond the classroom. So what can we do to help students struggling with or developing their writing skills? How can we move them from average writers to more academic writers? Now, Louis is going to start by discussing how motivation plays a major role in the success of developing writers.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, one of the major issues with students starting to become more improved in this academic type of writing is this, the concept of motivation. It's this hazy concept that we all know exists, but it's really immeasurable to see how a student is being motivated. And so starting looking then at what does motivation mean within the context of writing, before I get into this perceived self-efficacy specifically, I want to note that most of you who have been, we've all been students, or if you've been an instructor, or if you've assigned a writing task, you'll know that a lot of students tell you, their default is to tell you, I'm not good at writing, even if they're passing, because for some reason writing, more than any other subject, kind of gets conflated with expertise in a way that other subjects do not. A lot of times students say they're not good at writing because they don't feel like they can write like Ernest Hemingway or William Shakespeare. But you wouldn't hear a student who's passing a math class say, I'm bad at math because I'm not a mathematician. So the motivation then becomes allowing students to feel like they can do it. Because if they feel like they're able to do what the tasks are asking them to do, then that sense of that negative self-worth about their skills will start to dissolve, and they'll realize that it's not about being good at writing as much as it's about accomplishing the task through communication. And so that leads into this first concept of perceived self-efficacy. And this chart on the right, which is a little too small maybe to read in detail, gives these 4 keys to attaining self-efficacy, the notion that a person is good enough to complete a task. And you'll see that these 4 elements, which are the performance outcomes, or kind of success versus failure, the verbal persuasion, vicarious experiences, and then physiological or emotional feedback is an extended part of that. These are all part of 3 elements that lead into self-efficacy for students and for people in general. And those elements can kind of be interdependently connected as behavioral, cognitive, and emotional. And as instructors online, we're really good, I think, most instructors online at attending to the behavioral and cognitive elements of motivating students. We know how to give them action and participation to make their behavior meet what they need to do to improve their writing, to improve their skills. We know how to address the cognitive parts because that's pedagogical and we study that. We know how to teach them how to understand complex ideas. But sometimes, particularly in online teaching, since we're not in a classroom, it's hard for us to tend to the emotional needs of the students. We don't see their faces. We don't necessarily understand their journey. And this is where the challenges in motivating writers becomes so ephemeral and so difficult for us to really address, because they're having positive and negative feelings related to others in their sphere that we can't see or feel, and that affects their inclination to work. So then looking specifically at these keys, students will respond to their experiences of success and failure. And obviously, if a student has succeeded in the past, they're going to start feeling like they can succeed again. So what that means then from a motivation standpoint is, as instructors, we need to find ways to point out to students the areas where they have succeeded so that the notion of success does not feel out of their reach anymore. Much like any other skill that a student does or a person does, if they constantly feel like their efforts are being kind of all for naught and they're failing, inevitably that's going to lead them to believe, oh, here we go again. And that's what we want to avoid. And so that ties directly into verbal persuasion below. and I know our list over here on the left is out of the same order, but yeah, I'm just going based on the chart right here. Verbal persuasion is what it sounds like. It's the positive evaluations that we give to students, encouragement, or feedback that highlights progress. I once read an anecdote about a golf instructor who, asked his student to hit 50 golf balls out of driving range, and then after those 50 swings, corrected one thing. And the person was like, I know there's more than one thing wrong with my swing, but after 50 more swings, corrected one more thing, so on and so forth. And the notion is that when we persuade our students verbally, it's important that we give them advice in bits and pieces rather than all at once. If a student sees a laundry list of areas that they're not succeeding in, well, that's going to go back to step one, performance outcomes, and reinforce that they're not good enough at what they're doing. So motivating them to have this perceived self-efficacy starts with getting them to feel the experience of success, and that also relies on us persuading them that they are succeeding. The vicarious experience aspect of this, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's activities done by others that provide information to the student about the results that can come from their effort, okay? This can be direct, and a lot of us do this. We show models to our students of what a good assignment looks like. This proves that success is possible. Sometimes students get this notion that the assignment is something that a professor or a higher power wants, and students aren't capable of meeting it. And I don't know what you want. But if we can show students that, you know what, people have done this before and they've succeeded before, that again creates this sort of verbal persuasive, these all tie into each other, that leads them to consolidate success in their mind. It can also be indirect, okay? One way that I've seen this done in classrooms is by showing 2 tables of the average grade on an assignment for students who maybe didn't seek out resources or help versus students who did. When students see, oh wait, the students who are going to the writing center for paper review, or the students who met for office hours, their average grade was higher, that proves to them vicariously, if I do that, that it will work. And then the fourth and final element of this is the physiological and emotional state of our students. Writing is inherently vulnerable. Less than any other skill set, we feel like it's us being poured out onto the page. And so students oftentimes will, if they feel like their writing is ineffective, will immediately be confronted with anxiety and an aversion to trying again. So what we really want to do is we need to realize that students aren't turning in negative or unqualified work because they don't care. It's often self-preservation. It's often their way of detaching from the work, because if they pour themselves into it and are told it's not good enough, then they're going to ultimately feel like I'm not good enough. So therefore, we need to make the students feel like they can do it by adhering to these 4 elements. And if we can tend to these 4 elements and make students realize that they have power, well, then they're going to succeed at a higher rate, which leads to my next point. And the next point is that one way to do this is by personalizing our instruction. And this might seem obvious. This is something we've probably all felt and heard at various levels, but what calms a student more than anything in their emotional state is support. Feeling like they have the support of an instructor will make them succeed at a higher level. And what creates that support? This notion that they're being personalized. It's like going to the doctor and having them look you in the eye when they're diagnosing you and asking you questions. You feel like you're getting the help that is identified for you. And research has shown that this sense of emotional support in the classroom leads to higher rates of success. And it also shows that students who feel emotionally supported cope with challenges better. They don't give up as much. So we can do this through frequent personalized messages that don't have to be from scratch for every student. One way that we do this at the Writing Center, and it's with faculty, is we have our faculty referral form where instructors tell us specific areas where they want their student individually to work. And we send them emails with their name at the top, a short list rather than a long list, and students feel like this was made for them. That gives them the support to feel like they can succeed. And then the final way to really motivate students is just, and this might seem obvious as well, requiring that they use resources to prove to them that these resources will help them. Simply trying the services once, such as paper review, tutoring, so on and so forth, will demystify the stigmas that maybe students attach to them. Frankly, a lot of students don't go to tutoring because they feel like it's what, not smart people will do. And once they do it one time, they start realizing, you know what? not only is it not intimidating, but it's kind of social to be talking to a tutor here, to be getting the help from another human. And that element will statistically lead them to reuse those resources and to understand how to use those resources to benefit themselves. So then motivation comes from really kind of conceptualizing these abstract ideas I began with and moving into the concrete of how to address them.
Yeah, thanks, Louis. Let's look at some writing center resources to support developing writers and foster that self-efficacy. When students use the available resources, it does help to alleviate fear and the distress that they may have around their assignments. And the Writing Center has a number of resources to help students. Let's start with 24/7 writing tutoring. Students have access to tutoring 24/7, which provides personalized and one-on-one instruction. For developing writers particularly, it is helpful to make specific recommendations for students when sending them to tutoring. What should they work on in their tutoring session, for instance? You know, if the student needs help with integrating his or her sources, then mention that the student should ask the tutor for help with that specific issue so the student knows what to tell the tutor. The Writing Center also has a resource on preparing students for tutoring, if you would like further information on that. And I'll put that in the chat at the end of our session as well, at the end of our presentation. Now, in addition to 24/7 tutoring, writing tutoring, all of our students have access to the free premium Grammarly program, which can be installed in Word or Outlook. Grammarly is different from the other spell and grammar checkers in that it explains why the error the student is making is wrong. And this resource is extremely beneficial for students who have clarity issues or struggle with grammatical issues. The Writing Refresher series is a landing page that focuses on issues that developing writers tend to struggle with, including organization, paragraph development, grammar and style. And there are resources on this page available at both the graduate and the undergraduate levels. So this will apply for all students at any level. And under faculty services, you can find an HTML announcement for this Writing Refresher series that you can post in your classroom to help advertise our resources to the developing writers in your courses. And we also have announcements for the 24/7 tutoring and Grammarly that you can post in your courses as well. And this can be extremely beneficial. So this way the students know what resources out there are available. Now, Louis talked about personalizing the feedback as the strategy for supporting developing writers. And I'm sure many of you as faculty are already doing this, but this is an example as a reminder, or if you want to rethink your approach. This is an example of personalizing feedback in the grade book, but this could be applied to any outreach efforts such as Civitas or direct emails to students. Note that the feedback starts by using the student's name, followed by very specific comments and guidance. The instructor focuses on just one area of concern, in this case, thesis statements. So this creates this focused feedback so as not to overwhelm the student. The instructor has also included a specific resource here for the student to obtain further help. Now, if a student needs a lot of help, particularly a student working at the below expectations level, you might refer them to tutoring. And when referring students to tutoring, be sure to state specifically what that student should work on in the tutoring session so that it's most beneficial for that student.
So to summarize basically then how we can get these developing writers to feel like this basic level of their writing can move into a adequate academic type of writing that will help them, beyond the classroom. 1/3 of the students at Ashford are at this basic level or below. And so it is an issue that needs to be addressed, and it's a challenging issue. And this is affecting their employment and their advancement through their degrees. So we really need to make sure that the supports that we offer at Ashford are not only given to the students in a way that they can relate to, but are encouraged so that students see that they're truly for their benefit. They're supplemental, they're not remedial. And those supports include tutoring, Grammarly, many of the web resources from the Writing Center or the library or many other places online, and even something as simple as HTML announcements that engage different kinds of learners where they're going to have a visual in front of them rather than having to maybe feel that dread of reading when that's something they've struggled with in the past. And ultimately, motivation, and that's intrinsic motivation, particularly in the online world, really is what leads to success. Students need to feel like they can do it, and because they can do it, there we go. Because they can do it, they will do it. And so extending that motivation talk then, the next slide, Jen, there we go. What that motivation comes down to is these three major elements. Make the students believe they can do it, make them feel like it is for them. The classroom, the skill set, everything is something that is made for them. And then more simply, make them use it at least once. And by just going over those points below, making them believe they can do it is about highlighting their success, managing their state of mind so that anxiety does not enter and make them run. Give them that sort of vicarious experience of, oh, other people have succeeded, I can do that. And persuading them verbally. Because when they do feel this support, they're gonna work harder for, not just for you as instructors, but for themselves, for their degrees, for their professions. And while this mandated use that I recommend can feel sort of taxing, feels like, oh man, it's extra things for me to check as an instructor, the students will return on their own long after you give them that first assignment, if they just know that those resources are available to help them.
All right, so we wanted to leave a little time for any questions that you might have or for discussion. So feel free to ask anything about that we presented today or about the Writing Center in general, or feel free to share your own strategies for addressing developing writers. So go ahead and ask away if you have any questions. We had limited time today, so I know that there's lots that we could discuss in further detail. So please feel free to jump in and let us know if you have any strategies or if there's something else you'd like to discuss regarding supporting developing writers.
Hi, this is Steve Schneider. I have a question about mandating that they, go to tutoring or do something. Can we actually do that?
So,
And what's the consequences if they don't?
So I'll kick off the answer to that one. A lot of times, depending on the nature of that mandating, it has a lot to do with course sizes and whatnot. Students can be required to attend those services, but it can't be, I guess, grade dependent is the way to put it. It's just an activity in the classroom that they are required to show proof that they've done to the instructor as a small assignment. Is that the best way to put it, Jen?
There are some courses where submitting a paper to paper review or attending a tutoring session is required and graded. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about, a course where that's not already built into the syllabus. And so I guess there really is no consequence if they don't do it. It just sounds like we're more serious if we say they have to.
Well, one way to address that is by offering revision opportunities for students, because while the course is unable to build in, so not every course is able to build in that mandated use, instructors are absolutely allowed to say your revision grade is dependent on a receipt from the paper review or the online tutoring. And so that's one way to give them the opportunity to earn points back, which obviously every student, if they get that grade they don't want and they can earn some of the credit back, that in and of itself is a carrot at the end of a stick.
Stephen, you raised a good point that it's very difficult to, if it's not required, to make students go and use the resources. But I guess the way that I frame it is that it's going to result in a better grade, usually. So I guess framing it that way can be a motivating factor for a lot of students. but that is a great point. If it's not mandated, how do we get them to use the services? Usually if we can get them to use it once, they realize the benefits of using, tutoring services, and they, most of the time students will continue to use those services. So just getting them there once is, a good strategy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good question.
Thank you. Any other issues you'd like to discuss, or any questions about the Writing Center?
I do see that Stephanie had the same sort of answer that I said. She says, I know some folks require using a resource before accepting a rewritten paper. That's a very useful way of getting students to realize, hey, and these are points you can earn back. That in and of itself creates intrinsic motivation. So.
Any other questions before we move on? If you'd like to contact the Writing Center, if something comes up later, if you have any questions about our resources, or if you want to provide feedback to us as well, we welcome that. So do feel free to contact us at writing@ashford.edu. If you'd like to contact us directly, you can reach both of us. We're the presenters at Jennifer Dunn at Zovio.com or Louis Santani at Zovio.com. And we're available to you to answer any questions that you have about the Writing Center or about writing in general.
We have one more comment in the chat for you, Jen. You mentioned providing a resource.
Yes, I do need to do that. I'm not able to make my screen, I'm not able to bring up another document while I'm sharing. So can you do that, Louis? Can you, would you mind putting that in the
chat? What would you like me to link?
Preparing students for tutoring session, which would be under the faculty services area.
Coming up.
It's a really fun presentation that Millie and Louis created. It's part of our Write On series, and it just discusses kind of how to prepare students for a tutoring session. A lot of times instructors will just, have, will send a student to tutoring without a lot of direction. So it kind of breaks down that process and how to best utilize the tutoring services by giving the student a focus rather than a laundry list of all the things they need to work on, just focusing on one or two main points.
Forgive me for that brief outburst, but here's the link in chat to, it can be found on our website on our, I'm going to put this Write On series and webinars, which I will provide that link as well. Yeah, and we have a lot of good webinars and other videos that will help students and faculty alike with some of these writing concepts that are maybe foreign or just maybe a little rusty. Several of the students coming back to school after all these years could really use a quick webinar just to feel that confidence that, oh, I do know what I'm doing, the validation.
Yeah, and do feel free to reach out to us if you're looking for any particular resources to support your students, or if you have any questions about how to use these in your classrooms. These are the kinds of discussions that we like to have. So we're available to you at any time. So do contact us with any questions that you have.
Thank you so much for attending today. And thank you for having us. And thank you, Stephanie, for hosting.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you, everyone.